Hi, this is Mark Arnold with yet another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And today I have a longtime friend who's been working on a book for a long time, which is finally out. And I will show you the book first. It is called The Complete Web of Horror. And today I'm happy to bring you Dana Marie Andra. How are you?
I'm good, Mark. How are you doing? It's good to see you again.
Well, I made it home from England. That's a whole nother trip from itself. But
Yeah.
that was a good day, the day I met up with you. There's nothing
Oh, it
going
was.
on, very casual. You know, but the short story of coming back, it was uneventful, except I had to spend 12 hours in JFK because my next flight wasn't until the next noon. So anyway.
I've been there. That's for sure.
Yeah. And
That's,
some people said, well, why don't you go to a hotel? Well, by the time you get to a hotel and set it up, and it's time to go back to the
yeah.
airport anyway. So I
It
stuck
is.
it out. So
Mm-hmm.
I made it. I survived. But I learned some things on how to plan trips. Is next time I go to England, I'm going to book a flight directly from here to England. I mean, if I have a stopover, that's fine, but not try to
Yeah.
join a group in New York first. So
Yeah.
anyway, uh,
Absolutely.
needless to say, for our viewers and listeners, I met up with Dana in Liverpool. I was doing a trip in August this year, first time out of the country to England. And there's 3 days in London, 7 days in Liverpool, and Dana lives near Liverpool. Where are you exactly?
St. Helens.
Okay, how far
It's
is that from Liverpool?
it's about 12 miles from Liverpool, and it's in between Liverpool and Manchester.
Okay,
So
and
it's
then
two interesting cities.
mhm,
St. Helens is kind of a average little town, but
mhm,
you thankfully live close to big cities.
mhm.
And
Now, how did you
I
choose that? Is that just where you found a home? Because you told me
well,
that story, but
my wife, I got married to a Brit, and she was living and working in St. Helens. So when I came over, I wanted to buy a house. Part of the reason for leaving California in the first place was so I could buy a house, but also to be with her. But I mean, we could have lived in California, but I couldn't afford a house there.
yeah.
So here I could actually buy a house
Mhm.
with cash, you know, just pay for it. And that's how we ended up here. She was here, and I would love to live in London or even Liverpool, but those all those places are kind of like buying a house in San Francisco. So
Oh, okay. I didn't even check housing prices when I was out there. I was just happy to be there. So anyway. So I guess
yeah,
you like it there. You stayed there. Well, you've been there
yeah, I
10,
like it
10
well
years?
enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
miss California terribly. I mean, California is a fantastic. It's really the only place where that I would choose to live,
Hmm.
but being circumstances what they are, and getting a little older, it's nice having the National Health Service that's in England.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple of hospital stays that I didn't get any bill for,
Oh, that's cool.
which is nice.
Mhm. So your situation is similar to me, although I didn't move so far. I couldn't handle the prices of California either, even though I still love it. I have been back to California since I went to the England trip,
Oh,
but it was like sticker shock all over again. I was like, oh my God. And so I like living in Oregon and visiting California on occasion. And, it's the same reason housing, it's like can't afford it down there.
yeah, yeah. I think if I had stayed, even if I had wanted to stay there and have I just rent an apartment, it would have been I would have gone through my money pretty quickly.
You know, most places are a couple grand or up nowadays.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
it's like, Um, anyway, back to the purpose of this show, but since we're playing catch up from seeing each other.
All
Um,
right.
Web of Horror. I mean, I knew you before I did my crack book, I believe, or knew of you. And then the crack book, I think, and for those who haven't seen it before, it's If You're Cracked, You're Happy. I did a 2 volume
Yep.
set in 2011. And briefly inside, I talk about Web of Horror, which is what this other book's about, and just basically said it was Bob Sproul's attempt to do what Warren was doing with Creepy and Eerie. It wasn't very successful,
Actually,
and then it
ac-
went away, and that's all I know. And then
right.
you took
I
it from
think
there.
I think Carrie Bisson went to pardon me for standing and everything, but
It happens.
I think Terry Bisson went to Robert Sprout because he was editing astrology magazines, confession magazines, etc.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Can I do this horror magazine?" And so he and Clark Diamond, who had both been writing for Warren for Creepy and Eerie, writing some stories for him.
Hmm.
They were EC fans, and they wanted to do something in that vein. And they put together, just because Sprouse said, "Sure, what the hell?" They
Okay.
put the Web of Horror.
Okay, that's more
And
research than I did, but I wasn't trying to research web of horror, so I was just trying to mention that they did a magazine kind of like creepy. So,
yeah, and they did 3 issues.
mhm.
Here's the first two, and I had the third one, but I don't want to get up again. So
Okay, that's fine. To be continued. No, but what
yeah,
I'm sure I asked you this before, but what possessed you to do this particular series and compile it?
I love this magazine when it came out. Um, it was just I it was like a combination of like what, because I had gotten into fanzines, and so when I got into comics, I didn't know about fanzines. So then I discovered fanzines pretty quickly after, when I joined a comic book club in Miami, and
Mhm.
the people at the club were the people who published RBCC, which was a major fanzine back then, which is where
Right.
all the fans kind of congregated it, sold comics and sold other fanzines. And then I started to discover other fanzines like Squadron and Spot Fun, which were both EC fanzines, and quite a slew of other fanzines dedicated to other types of comics. Like Alter Ego started out back then as a fanzine. And and then it was in Spafon and Squadron that I first saw Bernie Wrightson
Mm.
and Mike Kaluta. Also, I saw an issue of Graphic Showcase #2, which had Wrightson and Kaluta and Steve Hickman. And so I was getting into all these cool artists who really weren't doing mainstream comics yet. And then I went to the newsstand to look for Castle of Frankenstein or Creepy and Eerie or whatever, the newest famous monsters. And this was on the newsstand.
Mm.
I thought, oh wow, what is that? And and I knew Jeff Jones, who did this cover, because
Mhm.
I was buying
I mean,
I was
that.
buying exactly, because I was buying his paperback covers because I had discovered Conan paperbacks, and a lot, and on the same rack was like Fritz Lieber paperbacks and whatnot that had Jeff Jones covers. And so all these elements kind of came balled up into one with this magazine.
Mhm.
And I just leafed through it. I thought, holy shit, this is the coolest magazine. I mean, Creepy and Eerie looked more polished in its own way, but
Mhm.
this looked more organic and more cool and more like handmade. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And
And what month was that? When is that the cover date at least?
oh, it was cover date December 1969.
Okay.
And so that probably would have been September, October it came out.
Okay.
And then the other two came out quickly. Then they had a regular schedule until it ended,
Mhm.
which was pretty quick.
Now, did you have trouble finding all the issues, or was the third one
Never.
harder to find? Oh, okay.
No, Miami was an awesome city for finding everything and anything that was coming out. There
So,
was there wasn't a magazine or a comic book or whatever it was that we didn't get in
mhm.
Miami. I mean,
Mhm.
I've heard people talk about not being able to find Charlton's, or the distribution being spotty on different things.
Yeah,
We got it all.
yeah. I think on the West Coast, because I grew up here, yeah, Charlton's were kind of iffy. Yes, but we still got them, but that was the one publisher. But Warren, I'm too young to remember Web of Horror on the newsstand, so sorry, but definitely
Okay.
always got cracked, and the other publications that Sproul was
Mhm.
involved with, which I didn't know at the time, but now I know that all those things were distributed pretty well. I mean, later he hooked up with Dell, and Dell was a good distributor. And I
Mhm.
don't think these were distributed. The Web of Horror were distributed by Dell. I think that was Ace still, correct?
I think so. Let me see. Yeah, the logo up there. It's an A up there.
Yeah, that's Ace. Yeah, yeah, and that was the original distributor. But then the side I know on the crack story is that Bob Sproul wanted greater distribution. He also moved to Florida and just wanted to change things up. And so in '71, he went to Dell for distribution for about 5 years, and then later did the third distributor, which I forgot off the top of my head. But anyway, um, when when the fourth issue didn't come out, did you just kind of say, "Oh well," or did you
No,
try to make?
I was like, what the hell? This isn't good. Because it was building. Every issue was better than the last one.
Mhm,
And as I said, I was getting um the RBCC, I was getting that every issue.
mhm.
And there was an ad on the back cover of RBCC which said Web of Horror might be dead or something.
Oh, okay. That's in the
I
book.
have it
Okay.
I have it in the book.
Yeah.
There it is. It's this page right there. It was an ad and
Hmm.
on the back cover of RBCC number 72.
Hmm.
And it said, please write to major magazines and implore them to continue the magazine. And it was, and then we knew that what was that it was stalled. It
Yeah.
was on, and so there was some hope when that appeared. But
Hmm.
then we saw all the stories started to appear in other fanzines. We saw the stories that they had done for Web of Horror appearing in Reality and Infinity and other. Those were two. I'll Be Damned, Scream Door. These were fanzines
Hmm.
that were publishing the unpublished stories that they had retrieved from major magazines.
Hmm.
And so then we knew, okay, it's dead. It's not
Did
going to
any
happen.
of those stories ever appear in another professional magazine, like in Warren or anything like that, or were they just in fanzines and stuff?
One of the stories appeared in Vampirella,
Oh, okay.
um, because it was Frank Brunner who retrieved a whole batch of the stories.
Hmm.
Because so what happened, why the magazine ended was Terry Bisson, the editor, got it into his head. He and his wife went and joined a commune.
Mm.
And they just took off. They just left New York and joined this commune. And he regretted the fact that he didn't tell anybody he was he was doing this, but he just split. And then Wrightson and Bruce Jones went to Robert Sproul and said, "Look, we'll edit the magazine. We'll keep it going." And Sproul said, "Oh, sure, fine." And so they worked on that. They were going to do that, but as they kept getting the magazine more and more put together to continue publishing, he had already Robert Sproul was already somewhere else
Mm.
in his mind, and he wasn't going to publish any more issues. And then Wrightson and Bruce Jones did a lot of work on that fourth issue, and they went to show it to Sproul, and they had to take a long haul into wherever the offices were, Great Lakes, New York, or wherever it was. And the offices were empty
Mm.
because they'd moved to Florida. Major
Yeah.
magazine on to Florida,
Yeah.
and, and Sproul didn't tell them that he was moving. But Brunner already got a notion of like, guys, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I want my art back.
Hmm.
So he went and grabbed a bunch of his art, a bunch of other people's arts, Wrights and Kaluta, Hickman, and gave everybody their art back.
Hmm.
There were still stories that got taken down to Florida.
Mm.
So, but that's where the stories that ended up appearing in fanzines came from. That Brenner got a bunch of art, gave it back to the guys. And so one of Brenner's appeared in Vampire number 10, and that's in the book. I
Hmm.
put the had a Vampirella over where Webster was. Webster was the horror host, and they put Vampirella over Webster. And so I had so when Eclipse published those comics of Frank Brunner stories with color added, Frank had the untouched pages that like still had Webster on them.
Mm.
So I was able to pull Webster off those pages and insert them into the actual scans from was it from Vamper? Did I scan it from Vamper? I think I had actual where did I scan those? I don't think I might have scanned Vampire number 10
Okay.
for that story. I don't think he had negatives for that story.
Okay.
There was there was another story that Frank Brunner had negatives for
Hmm.
that we were able to use that looked like the original art.
So where was the original art at that time, and then now? Where is it now?
Well, where it is now, it's in the hands of collectors
Okay.
because because years passed. Um, the art that appeared in the fanzines just kind of went wherever art goes
Yeah.
to collectors and whatnot. On
Hmm.
2012 or 14, because there were a bunch of stories that were just lost. We thought they were never going to be seen. There was one by Wrightson called The Monster Jar,
Mm.
and we thought we'd never see that one again. But there were stories by Ralph Reese and Norman Nodell and Mike Kaluta,
Hmm.
and so this auction came up on Heritage Auctions called the Cracked Vault
Hmm.
Auctions.
Yeah.
And here was the Monster Jar, and here was this Ralph Reese story, and there was this Wayne Howard story, and there was all this Web of Horror art that we thought was gone.
Yeah. Well, even
And
on
it,
the crack side, I'll say that, a lot of that. And when I was doing my crack book, we thought the original art was gone. The Sprouls just had it.
yeah, it was in, I don't know what kind of space they had it in, because some of those stories got some serious damage.
Yeah.
Just dirt, water damage, etc. And to think that this stuff just got thrown into a box when they
Hmm.
moved, but
Yeah.
like the Monster Jar had to be restored. And
Hmm.
this Frederick Manzano, he was the fellow, and he lives in France, and he bought the originals off of Heritage,
Hmm.
and he's also a art restorer, and he restored some of the art for those big Wally Wood volumes for that French exhibit book,
Hmm.
and he thoroughly restored these pages,
Hmm.
and that's a lost and previously unpublished Wrightson story that's in this book.
Wow.
And that's what makes it the complete web of horror. It's that it's
So,
complete. I mean,
hmm,
there is actually a Ralph Reese story that we only have 2 pages from. And Mike Cluter thinks that there's one of his stories might still be out there.
yeah.
And the cover for number 4, we've never seen it.
Hmm.
We had a scan of it, or like a photostat was what they
Yeah.
had.
I saw that you kind of reconstructed it as best you could, considering.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, that's how it was. I think that's how it was a mechanical what you used to call those like the production paste ups,
Right.
and So, but that painting, no one knows where it went
Hmm,
because it
interesting.
wasn't with the crack stuff.
Yeah. Now, if a significant amount of this material you're saying is kind of missing suddenly would turn up in the next few years, would there be a second volume, or would you revise this volume, or what would you do?
Yeah, I don't think there's that much more. I think
Yeah,
if we found the rest of this Ralph Reese story,
yeah,
we would just I think we would just incorporate it into a new edition
okay,
because it wouldn't be enough for another whole book.
okay.
So yeah.
Now, I know there's a lengthy genesis on this whole project because I was talking to you well over a decade ago on this. So, if you don't mind, tell me step by step the pitfalls of getting a book published like this.
Well, on the one hand, I can say with pride that I sold this book 3 times over. I had it accepted 3 times. I
Hmm.
pitched it and it was accepted. And getting a book accepted is not always the easiest process,
Right.
but this one people wanted it. The fact that it got canceled by 2 other publishers was really to its benefit because that art that was lost that turned up. So the way things turned out, it was for the best. But I first sold it to Dark Horse because I had Dark Horse had with my graphic novel Freak Some More.
Hmm.
I scripted from the novel I had adapted Tom DeHaven's novel, and it's drawn by Phil Hester and Andy Parks.
Hmm.
Has a nice cover by Charles Burns.
Hmm. I thought that was Charles Burr.
And so I said, so because I had been working on this book already, and I forget when I invited Robert Lewis and Robert Gerson, who were the two fanzine publishers who printed stories, to write essays about that time, about how they came to do that. But in any event, I had started putting together this book because originally I had wrote an article back in 2000 for the Warren Companion about the Web of Horror.
Hmm.
It's in the back of the hardcover edition.
Hmm.
That was a Tomorrow's book.
Yes.
And so I thought, okay, all the archives that are coming out, Creepy and Eerie, EC archives, there has to be a Web of Horror archive, right?
Yeah. Right.
And who better to do it than me? And so, because I love it, and it's a labor of love, and I wrote this article, and I interviewed Bernie Wrightson and Cluta, and to a lesser extent, well, I interviewed Brunner, well, I asked Brunner questions, and I asked Mike Cluta questions in emails. And that was written in the article, but I actually interviewed Bernie Wrightson and Bruce Jones. And so I had my article that was in the Warren Companion.
Hmm.
It's gonna have 2 more articles about the fanzines that they were in. And then I had this unpublished stuff that we knew about in the fanzines. And so Dark Horse said, yeah, I pitched it to them as the complete web of horror. Would that be a book you'd want to do? And they were like, sure, yeah, let's do it.
Hmm.
And so I was psyched. I was like, cool, that's great. But I had promised the everybody who was going to be in the book and their estates, you can't just print this stuff. And
Hmm.
I don't feel that you should just print this kind of stuff without paying people. It isn't public domain. And so I had given them a certain number, a certain page rate. And if the page rate that if they did the writing and the art, they would get one amount, and if they did only one of those things, they would get half the amount.
Would this be for everything in the book or just the unpublished stuff?
Just all the comics.
All of it. Okay.
Yeah. And so that came to about $6,000 or $7,000.
Hmm.
mean, it wasn't a huge page rate, but when you consider how many pages you have,
Hmm.
it starts to add up.
Yeah.
And so when I told Dark Horse, well, we gotta get this money for the advance. And they're like, well, wow, that's a lot of money. We
Cheapskates.
don't think we want to do that. And so they kind of said, yeah, we really can't do that.
Yeah.
And I think I did offer to do the crowd fund then,
Mhm.
but they weren't interested in monkeying around with that, I guess.
Mhm.
They just wanted to have a straightforward thing that they wouldn't have had to do anything really.
Right.
But in any event, they said they turned it down after having accepted it. So
Mm.
then I moved to England, and over here we have Titan Books,
Mhm.
and Titan is a big publisher. They go all over the world, and I asked them if they wanted to do it, and they said, "Sure, let's do it." And I was talking to them on the phone and everything, and then the issue of the money came up in the same fashion, and then I started. They were kind of interested in letting me do the crowdfund. And my memory of it is that they didn't really like the video I did, which I don't know why they didn't. It was just it was a bit like the one I ended up using. I think I had different music, but it was kind of the same thing.
Oh. I remember
But
seeing that video. I don't see anything wrong with it. What did they object to?
I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know, but it said then they said no years for I guess maybe even the 70s, but definitely the 80s. I wrote for the Comic Journal, and they did my 6 issues in the 80s.
Hmm.
So I knew Gary Groth and he knew me, and so I sent him a PDF of the current version of the book that had the articles and it had the history of the magazine, and but he did like the magazine. He loved the magazine, but he really thought the book was really a good book because it had lots of the history in it.
Hmm.
So he said, "Sure, let's do it." And I said, "Well,
Heard that before.
there's this money thing." He said, and I guess I mean I knew he wasn't going to be able to just cough up that kind of money. So I said, "I'm going to do a crowd. Would you donate 100 books to give to people who donate 100?" And so he took part in the crowdfund,
Hmm.
and he was really a good. I think they thought of the slipcase idea,
Hmm.
and but he was there right alongside me the whole way. It was supporting whatever had to happen. COVID kind of got in the way of everything,
Yeah.
but we resumed once COVID kind of receded, and the crowdfund was successful. I got Michael Clute to do some art, and he did a book plate
Hmm.
that I had the art for right up there. I bought the
Hmm.
art,
Well, that's cool.
and but Gary, he was the one I should have gone with in the first place. But if I had gone with him back when I first started doing this, it wouldn't be the book it is today. It wouldn't be as complete a book as it is now.
Hmm.
So everything worked out like it was supposed to.
Yeah. So mixed blessings, I'll say, but that's good. I mean, yeah. I mean, like asked earlier, if there's more to come, but there's probably not. You might do a revised version, but you know.
I would be surprised if I mean art is always coming out of people's collections. Like nobody knows who has this stuff. And I don't know what happened to the Ralph Reed story, why there's just um just like a big double page spread, and then the last page.
and he doesn't know where it is either.
Oh.
Hmm, okay.
But it's still most of the material, and
Yeah.
to call it the complete web of horror. There's
Yeah,
always some.
it's definitely more complete than I expected. So I expected maybe one or two extra stories, and it's like, wow, there's like two or three issues of material almost, so um I don't know if they're really
Mhm.
planning ahead that far, or if just Wrightson and all those guys were just ambitious or what. I mean, certainly they would have known that the fourth issue wasn't even coming out based on what you said.
Well, I think they had enough for five, maybe maybe up to issue six.
Yeah.
They had enough for issue four and five, and maybe starting to get some stuff for six. That
Hmm.
was it. But it was it's I was dedicated to putting this book out because I just loved this magazine. It was part of my I think I have this nostalgic thing for it, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think we all have that. But with things like Creepy and Eerie and EC, I'm not sure that it's altogether just nostalgia. I think it's just that we love those kinds of comics and that kind of horror storytelling, the artists involved in it. It
Hmm.
isn't just that that's I was 15, I was by the horror. No, it's an actual fantastic magazine.
Right.
And the stories are still entertaining, I find.
Hmm.
So it isn't just a nostalgia.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is true. I think I only have two of the three originals that they're hard to find. So this is a nice, convenient place to get them all. I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's part of the beauty of it. I think if you were to buy the individual issues, you would definitely spend more than it would cost to buy the book.
Yeah, yeah. I think one issue alone, unless you got a total beat up one, would be more than the cover price. So yeah. I fortunately the two that I got, I found them years ago, just relatively inexpensively. Somebody didn't know what they had, and I go, "Oh, what before?" But I can't remember which one I'm missing. I think it's issue one is what I'm missing.
Is that image behind you? Is that from the book itself?
That's the book cover. I just grabbed it off the internet, so it's off Amazon. So that's what's on there. I mean, the
The,
logo would be up there,
the
So I
logo
mean,
is above.
I could duck down and see
It's
that's.
the logo is well, yeah, it definitely covers that side of it,
Yeah,
like the
but this
stuff.
is from your book cover. It's not from the magazine cover. So that's what.
Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
well, the back of the magazine had the covers without any text on them.
Oh, that's true too. But
That's
yeah,
how we got them.
but
That was
I just literally grabbed this book cover from Amazon, and it just placed it up here where the logo is up there, and so I just get the prime image, which is fine, so there we go. I'm in a dungeon with these two people, yeah, and a snake.
in a snake. For those who haven't seen it, this is what the slipcase looks like.
I have not seen that. Yeah.
This
Wow.
is Epic still has these last time I checked on the website, but otherwise the book is sold out.
Yeah. Well, as I told you when I was in England, I saw it at my local Barnes and Noble in Springfield. Actually, Eugene is where that's located. And I didn't buy it because we were going to meet up and we were going to make an exchange, which is great. But every time I saw it, the next time, because I go once a week, they would be there. The next week, it was gone. The next week, there'd be like one or two copies. Then the next week, it was gone. And I go, crap, I hope you have one because these are selling. And I know how these things are. If you don't buy them right away, they're gone and they don't reprint them anymore, and the secondary market, bloop, bloop, bloop.
Well, I think there was going to be a second printing
Hmm.
because it sold out really quickly, which I'm pretty proud of. I mean,
So I guess Gary's happy after all that.
oh, sure. Yeah,
Hmm.
Gary's very happy,
All right, that's good. And,
but it was certainly a long time in coming.
oh, definitely, because I remember communicating with you, and I don't know if it was, I think it was after the Dark Horse one, and you just sort of like just let let down, like, oh, I lost the
Yeah,
publisher, where can I go? And I go, I don't know, and then I suggested different places, but I think then the Titan thing came along, and then you said, oh, it's on again. And I didn't know. It's like, and every so often it would either be, yeah, it's coming, or it's off, and it's like, oh, you know and so that's the saga for
those,
12
those
years.
it's always awful when you have a thing that's happening get canceled that way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for any reason of having about the book itself. They wanted to publish the book. They just didn't want to have they just couldn't afford to, basically, I guess.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these kind of books, I don't know what kind of deals they have with like all the eerie and creepy collections.
Yeah.
I don't know who gets paid what for those.
Yeah. I
Like if
think
it's
it
a book,
depends on what it is. A lot of stuff's public domain, and that covers up a lot of things where you don't have to pay. Um, and I'm
yeah.
sure if it was up to, like, if well, I won't say Fantagraphics because is doing this. Any publisher, if any publisher was to just compile this on their own, at best they might give like a token amount, say, here's $50 for your time for doing this work 50 years ago, rather
Yeah.
than paying them per page like you set it up, and published and unpublished. So I could see
Yeah.
probably how they negotiate on other things. It's like, get as
Oh, I
much penny pinching as possible. Yeah.
think when you're dealing with artists like Bernie Wrightson,
Yeah.
I mean, he isn't, I mean, he's a, it's like publishing a story by Harlan Ellison. Just because he's dead,
Yeah.
you can't just go print these things.
Yeah.
And so you have to pay for the right to do that.
Yeah. Well, was he was very much alive when you started the project, so it's like,
Wrights,
you know,
Wrightson was alive when I wrote the article. I think
okay.
by the time I started doing the book,
Okay.
I think he pass away in 2009. I'm not sure what
Maybe.
year he passed
Yeah,
away,
I'm not
but
sure either, but I thought you had started the book before he had passed away. It seems like I remember you kind of saying, "Oh, Bernie went," or something at one of the conventions we met up at, or something to that effect, because he wanted to show all these people, your
it was,
labors. Um, During all this time, did you pick up all the other horror magazines that came through,
I
good or
got
bad,
I
or
didn't
anything like that?
I didn't really get a lot of the eerie ones,
Hmm.
Tales from the Tomb and Weird and that kind of those magazines.
Or
I
the
saw that they had
skywalled ones too.
the Skywald ones weren't bad. They had a lot of Ralph Reese stuff, and Tom Sutton was in there, and so I bought a good number of those.
Mhm.
But they weren't they were hit and miss as far as the kind of material they had in there, and they had a lot of reprints from I guess from the 50s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Web of Horror and Creepy and Eerie were the ones that I mainly got.
Mhm.
And some of the Marvel ones were good because again they had Tom Sutton and I was a huge Tom Sutton fan.
Right.
And trying to think of some of the other ones. But I was also an Underground fan during this period of time.
Hmm.
I was getting lots of Undergrounds with Corbin. I was a huge Corbin fan.
Hmm.
So Undergrounds were also kind of fit like that, like Skull and Slow Death and those
Oh yeah.
Death Lab Kitchen Sink.
Hmm.
They kind of fit the bill in terms of horror comics.
Hmm. Now, were you buying like kind of the mainstream stuff like House of Mystery and House of Secrets and things like that, or were those?
Mostly if it had Wrightson in it. I
Yeah.
was a Wrightson fanatic.
Okay.
Rising collector. So I bought Nightmaster and I bought House of Mystery, House of Secrets, anything that had rights and of course Swamp Thing,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah,
But anything that writes in or Kaluta,
yeah.
they they were both in House of Mystery and House of Secrets.
Right.
Shadow,
Yeah.
which was by Kaluta, but Wrightson and Jones helped them sometimes
Hmm.
on that. So it was again, you knew who these guys were, and you knew that they often worked together, and they would go on to form the studio with Barry Windsor Smith,
Hmm.
and that those are the guys who did Web of Horror. That's
Hmm.
where it all kind of culminated.
Hmm. Now, did you meet Wrightson and all the different people you talked to or interviewed over the years for
I
the purposes of that article, or did you know them from conventions in the past
Oh,
and stuff like that?
I never met, did I see them? Because I went to the 1972 or 73 New York Comic Con
Hmm.
where they might have been, but I never met any of them
No.
in person. So I interviewed Wrightson over the phone
Hmm.
and Bruce Jones over the phone, and I haven't ever spoken to Mike Kaluta on the phone, but we've had lots of emails and things. So Terry Bisson, he's the one person who I met in
Hmm.
person because he was living in Berkeley when I was living in Albany, California. So, and he was the editor of Web of Horror. He was the one it was his idea.
Hmm.
And I never met Clark Diamond in person because I forget, I think he lived in Arizona or something.
Hmm.
But Terry and I became friends and we would have coffee. And so whenever And when I last visited California in 2022, we met up and had coffee in Berkeley.
Cool.
And then when the book came out, he had passed away in January. So I was heartbroken that he didn't ever get a chance to see the finished book after, because he knew I'd been working on it, and he answered a lot of my questions, and he wrote the foreword to the book.
Hmm.
So yeah, but so Terry Bisson is the one I did get to meet and become friends with.
Yeah. Of course,
And
that's
I
the
would
purpose of doing these books because, like my total television book, which I did in 2009, all those guys that I interviewed all gone now. It's like if I didn't do it then, wouldn't have ever gotten it. So,
Yeah, as I was all the way through this book, I was just thinking, I hope nobody else passes away because Jesus Christ,
yeah,
I want I want them to see the finished book. I want them to get their money. And so, but then Terry passed away.
yeah. Hmm.
So frustrating and so sad, but you know, that's what
Life
happens.
goes on. Yeah, yeah, or whatever. Um, I guess the inevitable question is, what's next for Dana Marie Andra, if there is another project at this time, if you can disclose it.
Yeah, I'm working on a Richard Sala was a good friend of mine.
Hmm.
Richard Sala is was a cartoonist and an illustrator who had this kind of horror, a kind of a quirky horror style
Hmm.
and kind of a sense. It's just kind of mysteries with some humor and some intrigue and kind of dashes of Edward Gorey and whatnot. But he was his own his own thing. I mean, there was nobody quite like Richard Sala. But I'm doing. Let me get it here.
Yeah.
We're doing a hardcover. This was the first book,
Hmm.
self-published. This is how Richard introduced himself to the world of comics and the world at large, is with Night Drive.
Mm.
And he was a painter. He went to school, he went to art school and he was a painter, but he always loved comics and monsters and monster movies and fan Phantomas and things like that. And kind of like David Lynch was a painter went into filmmaking.
Hmm.
Richard was a painter who and went and did comics.
Hmm.
And so I pitched it to Fantagraph. I said, how about if we do a hardcover edition of Night Drive?
Hmm.
And I had written a remembrance piece for a British fanzine here called Fanzine.
Hmm.
So I said, how about if we do a cover book that has my remembrance piece in it and has has some quotes from Richard in his own word talking about how the magazine came to be
Hmm.
and how one of the stories in here is called Invisible Hands,
Hmm.
and that was adapted and animated on MTV's Liquid Television back in the 90s. And so he talks about that.
Hmm.
So, and Daniel Clowes is designing the book,
Cool.
and it's going to come out from Fantagraphics sometime in the spring.
Cool. All right.
So that's my current project.
Hmm. So a
We have
lot
some,
quicker than 12 years or whatever.
yeah, yeah. This is a lot easier and a lot. It's a simpler book.
Yeah.
We had all the artwork, actually, almost all the art was in his estate, was with his all of his other things. Richard kept most of it except for like 2 pages.
Hmm.
And he had outtakes that he sold to various collectors that I tracked down and got scans of. So those will be in the back.
Very cool.
So it's going to be a nice little book.
Are you
And
gonna do like with the Web of Horror deluxe edition or just a standard
no, I
print?
think, well, I haven't heard anything about it, just the basic hardcover
Hmm.
edition.
Okay.
And it have kind of a Dan Clowes look to the to the design of it. He's
Hmm.
done a nice job on it, real nice job on it.
Hmm. Very cool.
It doesn't look like 8 Ball by any means, but it's very much in the Richard Salas style.
Yeah. Now, for those who don't know, this Richard Sala is a different Richard Sala than the guy who goes by Rich Sala, who publishes things like The Creeps and now Shudder and
Yeah,
Vampiris Carmilla and stuff like that. So just to
they aren't the
separate
same.
the two. Yeah.
Make that distinction because they are not. Because sometimes people get them confused.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to put it out there because
Thanks for.
I wasn't confused, but I know some people have been. It's like, well, I thought he was dead. How's he publishing? It's not the same guy. In fact, I don't even know if the other guy is that's his real name since he is
I
mimicking the
think
work
that
so
I
close.
think that is his name, and I think he and the cartoonist Richard Sala had a little bit of a conversation about it.
Okay. All right.
I,
So
but
fair enough. I mean, what if you were born Walt Disney and you couldn't help it? My name's Walt Disney.
yeah, I know.
So anyway, let's see what else. Was there anything on the web before? I'll go back to that one more time, and then I'll just let you plug away and stuff like that. Was there any other than the publisher stopping and uh, that along the way that was like any piece of art that was really hard to track down or anything like that, or just anything that was just more difficult than it seemed to be needed to be?
Yeah, Monster Jar was it was finding who owned Monster Jar was an issue,
Hmm.
was a problem. And, and it was thanks to the guys in the EC Fan Addict Club on Facebook.
Yeah.
Tommy Tommy Burns,
Yay, Tommy.
who what's his name? Jim. He's somebody he's an art collector who's at Heritage. Because Heritage
Oh,
is
Jim
now,
Halperin. Jim Halperin.
yes, Jim,
Yeah.
yeah, Jim Halpern.
Yep. Yep.
So Tommy talked to Jim Halpern, and Jim Halpern, he knows who buys what, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I think he told Frederick Manzano that I was looking for the art for this. And
Hmm.
Fred got in touch with me, or he told me, here's or he contacted Frederick, and he said, oh, yeah, she can email me if I wanted. In any event, he put us in touch.
Hmm.
And then that's where the pieces came together. It's like that was the big story that had to be in there, and
Hmm.
the pages looked terrible, even though there were there were scans we could have used off of Heritage, but they were dirty, they were a mess, and so
Hmm.
Fred, we retouched all of them. He spent a long time doing it for nothing, because he was a fan too.
Hmm. How much
And
retouching was needed throughout the book? I mean, was that the one story, or was most of it pretty
that was
clean? Or
that was probably the one that like needed the most.
mm,
I I myself retouched the letters page logos and drawings that were on Heritage, and so we had high def versions of those. We were able to replace we scanned the letter pages
mhm,
as they were in the magazine, but then we had fresh art for the art that was in the magazine.
mm,
So I saw and I did some of that retouching
okay.
myself. And the one of the Ralph Reese stories that David Odell gave us scans of, that cleaned up pretty good. I don't know that it needed a whole lot of retouching, but it
Mhm.
was kind of messy when it was on Heritage. Um, but yeah, Monster Jar was the one that I was putting out feelers. I went all over Facebook and elsewhere saying that does anybody know who bought this story?
Mhm.
Nobody said anything. Nobody came forward. None of the people who were the right people saw it and thought, oh, I better contact her.
Now, the
And
person who owns it, did he get it through Heritage or some other way?
yeah, he bought it from Heritage, and he also
Okay.
had the story from the first issue called "The Game That Plays You."
Mm,
He had that artwork, so he scanned the originals for that story for the book. So we
mhm,
had we had a number of stories that were scanned from the original art,
mhm,
and two of the Wrightson ones were among them,
mhm.
thanks to Fred.
Well, thank you, Fred. I guess his
Yeah,
name's in there in the book too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So hopefully it's still in print, but I
Well, I think
will.
there's copies people can find on Amazon and eBay and elsewhere,
Okay.
but it is going to have a second printing probably sooner rather than later.
Okay. And it'll be identical to the first. There's no changes or anything to your knowledge.
Oh,
Yeah. You you can say if there's minor corrections, that's fine.
it'll
Yeah.
be minor. It'll be
Oh,
minor.
that's right. I know one thing, and you told me, and I will say it because if you get a first printing, yeah, you'll probably show it, is
Yeah,
that the
it's
cover's in the wrong spot. Yeah, you can talk about that.
this should this shouldn't be where it is. This should be over by the first issue.
Yeah,
So I'm
that's right.
gonna
You told me that. I forgot that till just now.
move that over.
Yeah,
I have to unfortunately update Terry Bisson's
yeah,
bio in the back.
yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, the book we've got fine tooth combed before it came out. So
That's great.
that's no other stories have turned up. So
I have a vault of stories. No, just kidding. Issue 7 complete. No, just-
yeah, then that'd be a whole different trip. You know what
But like
would
I said, I'm surprised that they even had anything beyond a fourth issue. It's kind of like those EC. magazines that Feldstein was doing right before they quit Everything But Mad. The Confessions Illustrated, Horror Illustrated, and all that stuff. That they did find like another issue, but not like issues plural like you had. So
Yeah, I was surprised how many that because there's definitely more. There might have been enough for a fifth issue.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that might have been as far as they were ahead.
yeah, okay. And then like as a Squatron reader, they did a issue on Harvey's Harvey Comics Flip of all things, and reconstructed would have been the third issue of Flip, and then I know Dark Horse did Trump, and they reconstructed what would have been the third issue of Trump for Kurtzman's Trump. You know,
That's cool. I like when they do that.
you know,
I mean that's something I would like to do if I had the material for whatever it was. And I didn't think about doing a like this would have been number five because there was no sense of what was in number four
yeah.
or not. It was just a big fat number four.
I think in the case of the Trump one, especially, they had like a rough
A
table of
cover.
contents that Kurtzman just scrawled out saying this, and this. So they kind of had a rough outline of what it could have been, but it was by no means a complete issue, a complete third issue. It was just pieces from here, like you
So
like you had to do from the fanzine. This is from here, and that's from there, and whatever.
there were just two issues of Trump.
Officially, yeah, yeah. So
I
because
can't own I can't I can't have it on my show.
I know. No, it's like he ruined that too. Damn
That
it.
I thought
That
about
boop
and
boop
apparently it's
magazine.
pretty good, but
Yeah, yeah,
it's just I can't.
yeah. It used to be a good word. It used to mean something.
It used
Anyway,
to be a fine word.
yes.
So the person came along.
Mm. Anyway, we'll get off that topic. But anyway, back to Web of Horror. So new printing coming out, and then you can get it in the usual locations. Where do you get that deluxe edition? And is that going to have a second printing
That's
too?
that's no, I don't
Okay,
think so.
okay.
That's simply on the Fantagraphics website. It's the special edition. That you can go in there and click on the $50 one, and that'll say sold out, and then you can click on the special edition, and that says, and that's 125.
And is there a limited run on that? Like how many copies?
There was a total, they had a total of 150 because my crowdfund had 100 copies of it,
Hmm.
and then Fantagraphics printed 150 for themselves.
Okay.
It has the slipcase and the book plate,
Mhm.
and yeah.
Actually, it might be worth the investment on my part, even though I have the regular book.
Yeah,
Have both versions, so
well, it's really an awesome slipcase. This is Justin Allen Spencer did the
Mhm,
book design, and he
mhm,
did this some awesome slipcase.
mhm,
Pretty awful with the names. I'm almost certain that his name is Justin Allen Spencer.
mhm.
Same. Yeah, but gosh, I should get better prepared when I do interviews.
That's okay. It's all in the book. That's what I always say. It's like people come up to me all the time and they go, "How come you don't remember this?" And I go, "Because it's in the book. I don't, I don't remember it anymore. It's
That's
been put out
that's
on the page and it's done." So
what Einstein said. I don't have to remember anything because it's all in these books.
yeah, exactly. Hey, I'm as smart as Einstein. I don't. Anyway, all right. And if somebody has a question for you about Web of Horror or anything, or just wants to get in contact with you, do you have a website or contact email or something, or how people can get
Just put
in
my
touch?
email address in with the interview if you want.
Okay.
That I don't have a website though. I have a Facebook page, but
Yeah.
I don't have a website.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And any last words about getting a book published? It takes 12 years.
Hey man, I mean, I hear a lot about comics that people have been working on and they had the first ideas for it 10, 12 years ago. And I think people who try to sell books, they're going to run into a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah.
And I ran into a few.
Yeah.
I think maybe I got lucky.
Yeah.
Like with the first, with the, I think the book really sold itself,
Yeah.
and there were issues that that publishers weren't prepared to take on.
Mhm.
But to Fantagraphics' credit, they made it possible. They made it possible.
Oh, well, I will say the old adage worked, persistence pays off. So,
I
uh,
couldn't let this one just not happen.
yeah,
That was just like a no
yeah,
possibility.
yeah.
And
I mean, it's a very handsome book. So, it's like
it
get it
is.
for the artwork at least, but, read the stories and read through all the interviews and everything else. So,
Well, the stories are, I think, a lot of fun, and they're really quality stories, but people are responding well to the text features.
yeah,
And I think people tend to maybe sometimes just skip over the text features.
yeah.
I don't. I read them, but these ones are especially
Hmm. Yeah.
to the material.
I always find that actually the text pieces sometimes are the most interesting part because
Yeah,
it kind of puts something into context. I mentioned Erie Publications, and I had no interest in some of that stuff because it seemed kind of amateurish, especially compared to Web of Horror, the Warren stuff.
yeah,
But when you put it in context of what was going on back then, it kind of like, okay, I can see the appeal. Okay, all right. And that's why those text
yeah.
pieces work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those Eerie magazines, they were almost like they were. I don't want to say they were like pornography, but you really didn't think of them in the like when you bought them and you had them in your collection in your room, you kind of put it underneath the other stuff. But it was
I'm
so
too embarrassed to have this.
but it was so it was just gore for the sake of gore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um and I had a couple and they were fascinating, but they weren't good.
Yeah.
They
So
didn't
when I
look good.
got when I got that book, I was like, I got it because of all the text pieces, because it explained what they were trying to do at least. Whether
Yeah.
they succeeded, I don't know. I mean, they're trying to be kind of hip and also gory and, also competing with these other publications, and what better way to do with more blood, more gore, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how quality minded Myron Foss was, but
Probably not at all.
but I think Robert
Eh,
Sproul, he definitely Sproul for all his what he just jumped on any kind of topic, bandwagon subject magazine
yeah,
he could think of, but it was always a quality magazine as it
yeah,
was. Racked was the second tier from Mad,
yeah.
had some of the same artists in it, so it wasn't like web horror. I mean, what wasn't the weird Tales from the Tomb
Yeah. I do have
quality?
one last question because I'd forgotten earlier, but and you have it pictured in the book. Cracked also did a kind of a more of a famous monsters type publication called
For
called yeah, for monsters only. Yeah. Um, in any of your research, did you find that any of this material ever was considered for that publication or vice versa?
I don't know that it was considered for it. There was a web one of the web horror stories by Bill Dubay ended up for Monsters Only,
Okay.
and I'm not sure that it would have been used in web horror. It was it wasn't quite as good,
Hmm.
but but they did publish it in for Monsters Only, and
Yeah.
I had the horror host Webster
Hmm.
telling the story, but that was the only time that they oh no, they were going to reprint one of the stories from number one or two in for Monsters Only. I think it was might have been in number 10
Yeah.
for Monsters Only. But yeah,
Okay.
so they did use one story that was unpublished, and then they did a reprint.
Okay. Yeah, that was popping in my mind. all throughout this interview, and I said, "Oh, I got to ask it now," even though we already kind of concluded our interview, but I had to ask it. So, forgive me on that to just suddenly jump in with another question. But anyway, it's a pleasure as always to speak with you, Dana, and I'm glad we got to be on the Fun Ideas podcast. Everybody, go out and order Web of Horror, either the standard version, second print, or the deluxe edition, and
Or look for it on eBay. The second printing isn't going to probably be advertised anywhere yet,
okay.
but it'll be on eBay or elsewhere.
All right.
You
Well,
can
very
still find
good. And it's a worthy read, so definitely get it. All right.
it. Okay, good.
That wraps it up for this episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. I have my guest, Dana Marie Andra, and thank you very much for being on the show, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for having me. Talk to you again later.
Bye.